Hello, everyone, and welcome to Famology. We're John and Amy Clausen, and we're delighted to answer your questions about family, marriage, and parenting. And we kind of missed last week,
Yeah,
so
we
we're a
did.
little tardy, so I'm sorry about that. A few things happening in our life, the most monumental being that my father, Don Clausen, passed away last week. So we're mourning the loss of him,
Yeah.
although we're also rejoicing in his
Mhm.
legacy and knowing that he is someplace right now where he is probably not missing us.
Yeah.
I mean, he lived a wonderful life. I had a wonderful father, and I was telling Amy the other day, I don't think I ever really
Mhm.
took that for granted. I probably did at moments in my life, but certainly lately, never did take that for granted. So it was a life well lived,
Mhm.
and his legacy lives on. And this is a famology podcast, and my dad was all about family,
Yeah.
and actually established the foundation of family. In fact, it was said about him that he would actually father a family movement. And so I think we're just part of that.
Yeah.
So that's delightful. And we have GoFam Ministries, and in no small way, that was part of him and his legacy. So as we release this podcast and we go on in ministry, even in politics and some of the things the Lord is calling us into, it's all because of him, all because of Jesus, but it's all because of my father too, and what he stewarded for us. So,
Yeah.
so I just want to honor him in this podcast and just say thank you to all of you who supported us over this last couple of weeks,
Yeah.
and forgive us for missing last podcast. But we're up and running now, and we want to make sure that we honor him with continuing to move forward in ministering to families because that's what he was all about. So,
Yeah. Yeah. If you ever ask any questions on this podcast, how to handle um, in-laws that are tricky, I'm going to have no
yeah,
personal experience with that
yeah,
because my father-in-law was one of the kindest men you'll ever meet in your life.
yeah,
And he just was genuinely funny and kind and gentle and compassionate. And I have I have stories stewarded in my heart of how he changed my life and the words that he spoke over me just as his daughter-in-law. And
yeah.
Yogi and Papa, what treasures. So when you think about Yogs, she's on the his we call them Yogi and Papa Bears. It's a long family story, but Yogi and Papa Bear were inseparable for
Yeah.
years and years and years and years and years and decades and decades. And so Papa's on the glorious end of being in the presence of Jesus, and Yogi is on the I miss you, Papa end,
Yeah.
but knowing the good God that she serves and all the hope that's before her. But
Yes.
anyway, it has been quite a couple of weeks. So, and then on top of that,
So we're
this,
doing a memorial service for him
yes,
on Monday, March
is it the 16th?
16th,
Yes.
11 o'clock at Bethel's Rock Church in Farmington, Minnesota. Did I do that
Yes.
right?
Yes, you did. You nailed that.
So if you know Papa and you're connected to us or our family, we certainly invite you to do that and lunch afterwards. So
Yeah.
come celebrate his life with us
Yeah. Yeah. A life worth celebrating.
for sure.
And this week, our two teenagers, so our two youngest kids, Silas and Sadie, had the beautiful opportunity to go on a missions trip with the youth group from our church. And boy, the reports that are coming in, the Lord is moving and they're excitedly being used
Hmm.
of the Lord. Sadie said yesterday they were doing some food distribution and she had the honor of praying over 15 plus people, just in some in Spanish and helping translate both of them. It's just a neat opportunity for them. And then so our daughter and her husband, who are youth pastors at our church, are also on the trip. And then our son-in-law is a youth pastor at church, and they're all on the trip.
Hmm.
So our house now is just our daughter Lydia, who is very pregnant with our next grandchild, and Nova, who's 18 months, and Milo, who's 20 months. We are holding down the fort at home. So we are submerged in toddlerville at our house,
I
and
turned
it's
to Amy
still
and I said, taking care of little kids is like riding a bike. And she said, it is. And I said, no. Actually, I don't think it
and they're a
is.
little bit like twins
Yeah.
because they're just exactly the same age,
Yeah.
which it's so funny and so cute, and then it adds a little dynamic to it. this morning. It was so funny because just the word no was just coming fast and furious from both mouths, just like
Hmm.
setting the boundaries for the other one, exactly where you can.
Towards each other.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, they were.
It
Yeah,
wasn't for me. It was
no,
just each other. So anyway.
and they leave this trail of debris, like a tornado that comes through your house,
Yeah.
and it's nothing wrong or bad. It's just that
Yeah.
you can tell exactly where they've been.
Yeah. And we remember,
Yeah,
we do remember.
yeah. So
I,
we swept our floor more in the last
yeah.
2 days.
Or
So.
haven't gotten to sleep, and
No,
it's just crunching more, really.
yeah. So we're gonna be fine.
Yeah. It's a delight.
It is delightful.
They're so much fun.
So speaking of younger children,
Yeah.
that's our question for the day.
All right.
So the short question is, what is the earliest age to discipline a child? And let me just read a little bit of the longer question. Parents often wonder when it's appropriate to start disciplining a child. In this episode, we'll talk about the earliest age discipline becomes effective and what discipline should look like at different stages and how to guide children with both wisdom and love. That's actually a much bigger question.
That is it. Wow.
But
You have to put that in the middle because
we'll tackle the first one. I think. What is the earliest age to discipline a child?
yeah.
And I think I'm going to do more listening than speaking as I introduce my wife to answer this question. Amy.
So as soon as a child can understand the word no, you have to begin teaching them what happens when you say no and then they do it again. And when you've got little kids, even before they're 1 years of age, they can go towards an outlet and you say no to them. And if you let them then to go touch the outlet, no loses its meaning for your kiddo because you didn't actually set up a boundary. You just let them proceed and you just gave a verbal something that meant nothing to them. And so in order for your little ones to learn what no means and the value of that word from you, it's very important that whenever you choose to use that word and you say no, that you redirect the little ones so that they cannot do the thing again, because you want them to know that that's a boundary, that is something that you will not allow them to do. And as you establish that boundary, that means that every time they walk towards the outlet, you say no and you redirect them. And you are consistent in doing that, because teaching your kiddos the value of the word no is very important.
And I think in our society too, there's a push for unparenting, and it drives me crazy, as you know,
Yes.
because we're parents and we're supposed to be powerful and we're supposed to, really inject our lives into their lives so that we can steer and guide and direct them. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And so there's this trend, and you'll see it online, to try to minimize how often we say no.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes me want to gag a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's really about us. It's about trying to bring more comfort to us because
Yeah.
we get tired of saying no.
Yeah.
And so let's just try to remove no from the human language so
Yeah.
that the kids aren't always feeling like there's negativity.
Yeah. And
So
I agree that we don't want to devalue no in a parent's life. However, with an asterisk to that,
yeah,
I think that we need to use that word no only when we truly mean no, because sometimes it means that's not convenient for mom. You know what I
yeah.
mean? We use the word no. Can I do this? Or can I right now do that? And because it's not convenient for us, we say no. And then they ask or push the boundary a little bit, and we just cave because we realize, hey, I guess it really doesn't matter.
And I think the better question often, or the better comment is that we want to make our no's and our yeses more equal, and I think that's okay because they're still learning boundaries. So they're checking things out, and so they're going here, and we're like, that's a no, that's a yes,
Yeah.
that's a no, that's yes, and that because they're trying to figure out their world because they're little kids,
Yeah.
and so they need us
Yeah.
to do that. And so
Yeah.
if we just eliminate no's, well, then guess what? When they're older, they also eliminate
Yeah.
no's, and that becomes a bigger problem.
Yeah.
And not a bigger problem, but it becomes more of a prevalent problem and becomes part of their cultural lifestyle
Yeah.
of living outside of boundaries, and that's not good for them.
No.
And so no, that was good. But so the issue is that we're the ones that form those places, and so yes, we have
What
to.
do you mean by places?
Well, they're boundaries.
Yeah.
Where that's
I just
safe.
wanted that word to be
That
said.
safe place to live.
Yeah.
The place where there's health and there's wholeness. That's called a boundary.
Yeah.
And that's what we provide for them. And so there is going to have to be times when we say no because we don't want them to live
Yeah.
there. It's because we love them. That's why.
Yeah.
And so no isn't a big ugly word. And so I just want to empower our listeners that no is okay,
Yeah.
because you have to have a home
Yeah.
that operates with some semblance of order
Yeah.
and peace
Yeah.
and absence of chaos.
Yeah.
There's going to be some chaos. We've
Yeah.
experienced that this week,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean. But and that's okay. There's grace for that. But it's our job to establish the boundaries.
Yes. Good. Good. I I was just going to finish what I was saying about uh, I totally agree, and I know
Mhm.
you're wanting to hit the value of no. I just want to make the equal point that say no when you mean no.
Yes.
And if you say no, then you have to follow through with your no. If you mean it's not convenient, then just take a second to think about it before you say no.
That's good.
That's just all because as a mom of 29 years, there's been so many times that I think to myself after, why did I just like knee jerk react and say no when
Mhm.
really I just needed to take 2 seconds and think about it and go past my own convenience and realize, hey, whatever's happening here is not that big of a deal. Maybe it's okay for the mud puddle to be jumped in. You know what I mean? And I do actually have time to clean them up afterwards. And it doesn't have to be a no today. And so when you say it, you just have to follow through
Yeah.
and really mean it. And so when you've got little tiny children and you're trying to establish that boundary, uh, if you have said no, then there's a follow through that's expected. And if it's a little one, like you've got a 1 year old, and I've had much experience with this week, tossing food off the high chair, and you say no to them, but continue to let them throw food off the high chair.
Yeah.
That's confusing because
Mhm.
no has to be a boundary word. And if you're using as a flexible, like, hey, I don't really want you to do that kind of word, your kids are learning what no means to you. And you're teaching them in the flexibility of that boundary what no means. And so if you want your no to mean no, then if your child starts throwing food off the high chair, then they need to be either taken out of the high chair, and then you can put them back in 3 minutes later and say, okay, we're going to try it again. You may not throw food off your high chair. And if they do again, then you can remove them. But you have to set the boundary line where no is said. Does that make sense?
So what would you say to somebody who responds to that and says, "Well, what's the big deal?"
Yeah.
So either what's the big deal that they throw food off the high chair, or what's the big deal that you said no and they did it anyway?
Yeah.
They're just little kids. How would you
Yeah.
respond to that?
You can decide that you don't care about picking up food off the floor. I
Mhm.
mean, as a family,
Yeah.
you get to decide that. Um, I I was just using that as a random boundary.
No,
So if it's not a big deal to you, you don't need to say no about it. If it's a safety issue or if it's an obedience issue, then I would just ask you to reconsider.
mhm.
Throwing food off the high chair is an example of childish behavior that you can train, and it actually helps them and you in the long run to train childishness. But if you have a child who is going to hurt someone else because they're kids and they do those things, and they're approaching someone and you say the word no, and no is an ambiguous word to them, and you have not
That's the key. Yeah.
established that boundary, you're going to say no, and it's going to be fluid. And so what matters if they stop before or after they hit with the thing, and so that's where it matters. Those boundaries, realizing that the word no is a stopping word, not a flexible word, is very important.
So to be clear, if they're on the high chair and you've said no to throwing food and they look
Yes.
you right in the face and
Yes.
do it anyway,
Yeah.
that needs to be
Disciplined.
disciplined and
Yep.
addressed as a parent,
Yes.
because that's they crossed a boundary. That's not just childish behavior anymore,
No.
right? So that's
Yep.
I'm just trying to clarify. Yeah,
Yeah. Yep. And so, but if you've never said no and you're letting them throw it off, I mean, live it up, kid. You know what I mean? It'll be messy.
yeah,
And as parents, we get to choose where those boundaries lie for our kids.
yeah.
And for me, when we started having a family, our firstborn had some severe health complications, and we spent a lot of time in and out of the hospital, sometimes in crisis mode, a lot of times in crisis mode. And so for me, I had to really simplify parenting because we had kids fairly close together, all 2 years or younger, under. Um, and so I needed parenting to be simple for me, because if I had to think through okay, is this some time that I would spank a child for this? Do I not spank a child? Trying to figure out like how I handle every situation was too confusing. And so for us, the boundaries were, if they've disobeyed mom or dad, that would be something we would give our kiddos once. We called them reminders on the behinders. And if they would hurt somebody else, themselves or somebody else, that would be something that we would give them a reminder on the behinder. Anything outside of that, we would just distract, curtail, redirect, all the other things that you do. And so, but the first thing and the prioritiest thing is to establish the value of the word no, and that actually means something, and it's a boundary that cannot be crossed. And that can start being established when they are 10 months old and you're redirecting them, so that every time they do something, when it's a no situation at 10 months of age, that they get redirected and moved away and not allowed to do that thing again. So they begin to understand the connection that no has a valuable meaning in their life, and it's something they don't cross.
So just to address the issue of spanking, because people are probably going to ask, do we at Famology, do we support spanking?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. And there's a very good reason for that. It's because how do you communicate a boundary to a 1 or 2 year old, or a 2-year-old? Let's just say, let's use a 2-year-old as an example.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can try to reason with them. We can try to say, oh, you crossed
That's
a boundary.
fun.
So good luck. And so a lot of other parenting styles, and certainly the anti-spanking movement, would say, just don't deal with that. Wait until they're old enough to be reasoned with.
Yeah.
Well, the problem with that is by the time they're old enough to be reasoned with, they have already blown up boundaries. There just isn't any. And so to try to reel that back in and then try to put boundaries around kids at a certain age, whatever age that would be, the age of reason.
Yeah.
When is that?
Yeah.
I'm 56. I still don't know if I'm there yet. The age of reason. But here's the deal, and this is just the phrase that's come to me: is there needs to be a consciousness of boundaries. And I believe a consciousness of boundaries can happen at a very young age, because they know that the whole world, they don't have access to the whole world, because the whole world is harmful. And so we as good parents put boundaries around kids. And here's the deal: I still have consciousness of boundaries. Speaking of my father, we're honoring my dad in this podcast, but my parents raised me in a consciousness of boundaries, so that when I got even older, started dating, started doing work, started taking care of other people, when those things happened, that consciousness of boundaries was always there. And I still have it. I still have it within my marriage. I still have it how I parent my children. There's still boundaries around me that I'm conscious of, that I believe started when I was 2 years old, maybe even younger, because my parents cared enough about me to say, this is what's healthy and this is what's good for you. And so there may be a temptation to say, oh, I can just wait, or we'll deal with this down the road. I won't make a big issue of I won't make a big issue of throwing the food off the high chair now, because that's just not that big a deal. Later on, when they become bigger deals, we'll deal with it then.
When it's a bigger deal, it's a really bigger deal.
And they have no value for it. So you have to instill value, consciousness, and their behavior. All those things you have to take care of later. And so a spanking done in love, not with anger or with malice or trying to hurt, those are it's a physical signal that they've crossed a boundary, and then they know that they've gone too far. So that next time we hope that things would change a little bit differently, but they may need to be parented again. But that's the beauty of it. And I think you have to, if anybody tells you otherwise, you have to ask them, what about a 2-year-old? Because most of the time they're going to go, we just wait for later. And I just don't think that works. And historically it doesn't work. And sociologically it doesn't work.
And the effort that you put in when your kids are under the age of 5, where it's just, you're continually reestablishing the boundaries with them, the effort that you put in those years, you are going to reap the benefits the rest, and they will reap those benefits the rest of their lives. And it's an intense time of parenting where it just feels very continual, because they're just figuring out their world and how they function in it. It is completely normal for our kids to want to figure out where their boundaries are and to want to cross them. So, don't feel like your kid's uniquely broken because they're, because sometimes we take it personally as a parent. They're just trying to figure out where they are safe to live. But the efforts that you put in there, you're going to reap the benefit for in the teen years. Guys, I'm telling you, I've loved raising our teenagers. It has been delightful. 90% of the time
Hmm.
because of the investment into their character and those boundaries when they're younger. There's new stuff to deal with in teens, but it wasn't those things like you have to obey mom. That had been established when they were 3. They learned that they need to obey mom. So when they're 15, and as a homeschool mom, I'm saying, here's your algebra lesson. I wasn't dealing with them obeying
Hmm.
at that level. There's other stretching parts of teen years that are there to navigate, but not the stuff that was taught when they were young. That didn't have to be revisited.
So we have a hot tub. The hot tub is going to come up very frequently in this podcast. It just is because it's my happy place, and a lot of the Lord speaks to me in the hot tub. Anyway, I was in there with Milo the other day,
Yes.
and we have a control panel on the hot tub that is kind of the one boundary on the hot tub, because if he starts pushing buttons, all the heater thing gets all
Right.
messed up. And so that's been the one thing. They kind of have access to the full hot tub. They can do whatever they
Yeah.
want to with all the other dials, but that one I usually say no to. So the other day he was in the hot tub yesterday,
Yeah.
actually, and he had his little pudgy finger, and
So
he went
cute.
toward the panel and he stopped 2 inches and then looked at me.
Yeah. Oh,
And
cute.
it was very cute. And I said, no, I didn't even, it
Yeah.
wasn't bad. I'm like, nope, that's a no.
Yes.
Took his hand back and then went
Yes.
back and played. But he was
Yes.
just checking to see if it was still there.
Yes, that's so cute.
And I love that because it already was established in him. So I do want to answer this question very specifically, or have you answer this question very
Yes.
specifically. So what is the earliest age that you would, quote unquote, discipline a child? Because Milo's already getting it.
Yeah.
I mean, discipline and also getting the boundaries. He's also
Yeah.
he has consciousness of a boundary,
Yes.
which I think is super cool. But
Yes.
practically speaking, for a new parent, like when would you say that time is, generally speaking?
Yeah, as soon as they begin understanding. And I think that we have to redefine discipline
Mhm.
because it's disciple. We're discipling our children. That's what we do. And so if you have an 8-month-old crawler and they are heading over to, I mean, outlets are the earliest thing that's kind of a serious boundary for kids, and you begin to say no, you're not going to let them continue going. So you disciple your kids, you're disciplining your kids by redirection. But I feel like what they're maybe asking is, at what age would you physically discipline your child, or is that what your assumption is?
I think so. So let's just say spanking is a legitimate option, and
Yes.
people think, okay, there's going to be some issues that pop up that may require a spank.
Yeah.
What generally is the age group for that, Jenna?
Yeah, I think as soon as your kiddo, you've said no, and they absolutely look you in the face and they do it again.
You kind of know.
And you can look in your eyes. And I think that it's not an age, it's a developmental stage.
Yeah.
And so every child develops at a different stage. And I think moms, we tend to give our kids extra grace, like, well, maybe they didn't quite understand. Chances are they did, but if you're still feeling like, I'm not sure they understood, you can just continue to redirect them. However, as soon as you admit to yourself, hey, they knew that and they are directly going against what I've said, and it's important, then it's okay to begin doing one spank. And I'm just going to explain our process for spanking, because I think it gets so misrepresented by our society, because people use spanking as a last resort. And I feel like when you do last resort spanking, it's done inappropriately. Spanking is never a last resort for me. In fact, if I get to feeling like we're at last resort, spanking will not be my option, because last resort usually means I'm upset as a mom, like they have just continued to cross the boundary. And I do not spank when I'm upset. Spanking in our home was matter of fact. And when a kiddo knew that something was a boundary and they deliberately crossed it, then I would take them into a different room, because we had lots of kids. And so it was never done in public. And I would say it, for my 15, 16-month-old, mommy said no, and you may not touch that, or you may not, whatever the boundary was. I would tell them, even though they can't verbally say it back to me, I would tell them what they did. Mommy said no, I'm going to give you one spanking and then you can go play. And so then I just give them one spank on their diaper. It is not about spanking hard. It's literally the process of a little reminder on the behinder. And then they get up on my lap and I look them in the eye and I say, and I would say this verse with them every time. children, obey your parents. And then we do big stretchy arms, big wide circle in everything. For this pleases the Lord. And my kids began saying that back to me. And the little ones would do the hand motions right away. And the older ones, could say the entire verse. And then I would take them back out to whatever the situation was, and we would practice obeying mom. And so they would go out and I'd say, okay, you may not throw food from your high chair. And I'd put them in their high chair and set them in there. And then they would be able to sit there and successfully eat until they didn't toss their food on the floor. And you can just repeat the process. Matter of fact, kids are going to want to find out your boundary. And so don't get upset if you don't remind and be like, oh, I said it 4 times, you're not supposed to throw the food off the high chair. Then we start getting upset. Just matter of fact, it's just you can't do that. This is why I love you very much. And then they're off and playing.
It's never about shame or guilt. It's never about our own anger or alleviating our anger. No. It's never about those kind of things.
That's wrong.
That's called punishment, and that's a different thing.
Yeah.
And the goal is to bring children restoration back into the boundary as fast as possible. Yeah, quickly. As fast as possible. That's the goal, because that's what good parents do, and we love our kids enough to put those boundaries around them. And so that's the goal. It's not big and ugly and scary.
No,
it should never be scary. No. In fact, it's a good work. It's discipling your children. Yeah. And so I think that's the most beautiful part of the whole thing. So we can do that. If you're concerned about spanking, if you feel like, there's some generational things going on, and you feel like you were spanked and it wasn't a good experience, start asking some of those questions for Famology, and we'll talk about those more because we have more to talk about there.
Yeah.
So if those are some things that you're concerned about or you want some more clarification, you can go to our website, which is
gofam.org.
gofam.org. And check in with us, ask those questions, but also submit these questions because we want to talk about this more. Certainly have more to say about that as well. But at the end of the day, it's about loving our kids the best way as possible. And it starts early.
Yeah.
It starts early.
And parenting from a place of joy.
Yeah.
And it's not inconvenient to have to discipline our kids, right? These are actually holy.
It doesn't happen at convenient times.
No.
However.
But if we view it as an inconvenience, then it is an inconvenience. The Lord said to me when I was a mom with tons of young kids, he said, Amy, I want you to see this as a holy opportunity. And that phrase from the Lord really changed my whole perspective on when I had a holy opportunity to discipline my kids. Because what a great thing. I actually love it when the Lord disciplines me too. I don't want to act recklessly outside of my boundaries at 52. Right. I welcome his correction. And so having a healthy attitude towards the correction and boundaries of a parent and of the Lord is fruitful in all of our lives.
And when the Lord disciplines us, it's also not scary.
No.
And it's also never about shame or guilt.
No.
It's always about restoring us as fast as possible. And so his ways are higher than our ways. And so we need to connect with his heart for all of those things.
Yeah.
So do you want to pray?
Sure. So Lord Jesus, we are thankful for all the beautiful children in our lives. Father, we're thankful for the generational nature of family. Mm-hmm. And I just feel that so deeply in this season. And I just thank you that as one generation is faithful to you, the next generation rises up and takes its place. Yeah. And so, Father, let us as moms and dads walk in great wisdom before you. We thank you that you are great at being a parent. You are unending in the wisdom that you hold for us. And every question and every need we have, we know that we can come to you. Mm-hmm. We thank you that you've given us great peace, great joy as we set boundaries in our homes that will be fruitfulness for the generations to come. We love you. Amen.
If you would like to submit a question for Johnny and Amy to answer on a future episode, head over to the Famology page on our website at gofam.org or simply click the link in the caption below. And if you're enjoying the show, be sure to leave a review or a comment wherever you listen or watch. It really helps us out. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.